Today, we'd like to share the history of Vermont's Revolutionary-era heroine, the indomitable Anne Reynolds Story. Anne Story was born Hannah Reynolds in Preston, Connecticut, in 1736. Orphaned at age 8 and raised by her uncle, at 19 she married Amos Story, and by the time Anne was 33, they had 5 children. Like many young families from southern New England, they made the decision to relocate to the territory then known as the New Hampshire Grants, now Vermont. In 1774, Amos and his 14-year-old son Solomon traveled to the frontier settlement of Salisbury on Otter Creek, where they built a log cabin and started clearing the land. Tragically, Amos was killed while felling a large maple tree. Young Solomon ran north to Middlebury, where the closest help was to be found. A settler named Benjamin Smalley helped him bury his father by the bank of the river, near the grave of one of Smalley's own daughters. Solomon then returned to his family to report the sad news. Anne could have been forgiven if she had decided to give up on the Grants, as her uncle advised. War had broken out between the king and his American colonies. Yorkers, Loyalists, and Native Americans posed threats to the northern settlements. Undeterred, Anne resolved to move with her children to the 100-acre homestead in Salisbury begun by Amos and Solomon, to make a new life. Anne was said to be handy with firearms and could use an axe with a skill and power that few of her neighbors could equal. The location of the Story cabin on the frontier made it a frequent stopping place for the Green Mountain Boys, who supported the rights of Grant settlers against the claims of New Yorkers. Anne said she was ready to join the boys herself. "Give me a place among you, and see if I am the first to desert my post." She told that story, among others, to a neighbor, who wrote them down. Next year, the momentous year of 1776, a party of native warriors, allies of England, burned Anne's and a neighbor's cabins to the ground. Most of the settlers had already moved south, but not Anne. She and her children, Solomon, Ephraim, Samuel, Susanna, and Hannah, watched the conflagration from the safety of a canoe hidden in reeds by the river. When the danger had passed, they rebuilt. If the smoking ruins of our home disheartened us, the hope arose that the Indians had made so little in this excursion they might not visit the region any more. The destruction of their cabin showed the need for a safe hiding place for Anne's family and Green Mountain Boys on the move. With the help of a neighbor, Anne hollowed out a cave in the high west bank of Otter Creek. She placed the dugout entrance right at water level, just high enough for their canoe to enter, which could then be camouflaged with branches. Inside, they had room enough to sleep and store food and supplies for the Green Mountain Boys. On one occasion, a young woman with an infant was sheltering with the family in the cave when the baby's cries alerted a passing Tory, a Loyalist, named Ezekiel Jenny. Jenny waited until he saw the family exiting the cave, then confronted Anne and interrogated her as to the location of the patriots. "I gave evasive and dissatisfactory answers to his questions," Anne recalled. "This exasperated Jenny, and he threatened to shoot me on the spot. But to all his threats I bid defiance, and told him I had no fears of being shot by so consummate a coward as he, and finally he passed along down the creek." After Jenny's departure, she tore the flyleaf from her Bible to write a note to the nearest camp of the Green Mountain Boys, and sent Solomon to deliver it. The boys immediately set off and captured a band of 20 Tories, whom they delivered to the garrison at Fort Ticonderoga. From that time on, Ethan Allen and other Green Mountain Boys stopped by Anne's cabin on a regular basis for food, ammunition, and military intelligence. 2 of Anne's sons, Solomon and Ephraim, served in the war effort in a militia company under Benjamin Smalley, the man who had helped bury their father. During the war, Anne would stay on her farm in the summer and spend the winter in Rutland. In 1792, she married the widowed Captain Smalley. He died in 1807. 5 years later, Anne married Captain Stephen Goodrich, a veteran who had served at Bunker Hill and Saratoga. Anne died in 1817 at the age of 75. She's buried in Middlebury's Farmingdale Cemetery. Her original stone simply names her as Hannah Goodrich. In 1898, the Anne Story chapter of the DAR added, "Formerly Anne Story, the heroine of Thompson's Green Mountain Boys, which is a well-known historical novel. Efforts to memorialize Anne Story's contributions to the history of Vermont began in the 19th century. In 1893, the newly organized Rutland, Vermont DAR chapter took her name. A monument was placed at the site of her cabin in 1905, and another at the site of her cave in 1914. A replica cabin was placed at the cabin site as part of the 1976 bicentennial. It burned down in 2004. In 2026, we'll be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The time is right to re-examine the role women have played in the history of our state and in the American Revolution in particular, and to shine a spotlight on a Salisbury patriot of exemplary courage and determination. What can we do to keep the memory of Anne's story alive to inspire us today? Planning and efforts are underway for improved access to and visibility for her monuments, and, above all, to create greater public awareness of her story. We welcome, we need your participation. You must admit, Anne Story's story is a great story to pass on to today's Vermonters.